Hello, everyone, and welcome to Geneva 2035, Science Anticipation and the Future of International Geneva. I'm Dominique Soguel, I'm a journalist with Swissinfo, and it's my pleasure to host you here. The pressures on Geneva today are real. Budgets are tightening, jobs are being cut or displaced. Power is tilting in new directions, while key leaders are cherry-picking or outright attacking multilateralism. The cooperative system the city was built to serve is under real strain. But at the same time, there are opportunities. Technology and scientific innovation are transforming our lives, new winners and losers, creating new winners and losers, and new kinds of risks at the same time that we barely understand. The institutions built for another era are struggling to keep up. But if any place can adapt, it's Geneva. And here at CERN, a place built on curiosity, collaboration, and foresight, there's no better setting to ask, how can we reboot multilateralism to do a better job of looking ahead instead of always scrambling to catch up? To explore that, we're joined by Jürg Lauber, Ambassador of Switzerland to the United Nations and President of the Human Rights Council, Tatiana Valovaya, Director General of the UN Office at Geneva, Sylvie, Chief Scientist at the WHO, and Sami, Kanaan, former Mayor of Geneva. Before we begin, just a quick reminder, you can also join the conversation online with hashtag GESDA Summit, so please do that. Tatiana, perhaps you can start us off. You lead the UN's European hub at a moment when trust in multilateralism is shaken and global institutions face a funding crunch. How can the UN and International Geneva more broadly harness science anticipation to make multilateralism faster, fairer, and fit for the future?
Well, we're living in very challenging times, and multilateralism is quite often under attack. And one of the reasons why multilateralism is under attack maybe is exactly the case that quite often citizens, nations, ordinary people, they don't see that multilateral system is prepared to find solutions for new challenges. Because quite often diplomacy, international arena, we catch up. There was a huge pandemic, and we realized we need additional legal instruments. And the Treaty of Pandemic has been negotiated here in Geneva. It's a great success. We will use this treaty in future pandemics. Unfortunately, that's the focus of professionals. There will be future pandemics. But that gives us that normally when something arrives, conflict takes place, when nations try to find the solutions. But it should be otherwise. We should anticipate what kind of challenges we are going to have in 5, 10, 15 years, and what kind of legal instruments we need to govern globally in the interest of the whole humanity these challenges. So we are talking about AI, obviously. We are talking about climate change and the new instruments which allow technologically to change the climate, to change the weather. We are talking about gene editing and new possibilities of biotechnology. All these spheres, well, of course, outer space and many others, all these spheres are developing in a very quick way, but we don't have international legislation. And here in Geneva, we have absolutely unique ecosystem. We have practically universal representation of the member states. We have more than 40 international organizations belonging to UN system, but not only. We have a very creative and vibrant civil society here, non-governmental organizations, private, and there are lots of platforms here, like GESDA, where we're discussing these things, and we can interact with the diplomats representing their countries and see how we could launch these things. So for me, for International Geneva, the future is very closely united with these new challenges and the new spheres where we really need global governance.
Thank you. Sylvie, I'd like to ask you, the WHO had to navigate biotech, AI, and data sharing before global rules caught up. What lessons did you draw from this experience that can guide us in making global governance more anticipatory going forward, but also more trustworthy?
Thanks a lot for this very important question indeed. And I think one of the things we have done recently is first create a science council. And it's a group of wise people who are looking at the horizon and telling us these are the new technologies that may be coming. And the second thing is having foresight exercises, trying to anticipate what's next. And this is very important because for health, it takes first a lot of time to translate science into policy. And second, we need also a regulatory framework or legal framework to implement new ways of doing things. And it's very important for health, for instance, to make sure that the rules of safety and security and ethical approaches also are respected. And all of this takes time. So if we just, as you said, do things when they have already happened, then it's too late, and technology has already evolved to the next stage. And it's very important to do it here in Geneva, because a lot of this is also about collaboration between countries, about how we can make those innovations accessible to all. If I think, for instance, about vaccines, and it's not something that can be done only at national level. It has to be done at multilateral level. And so that's why it's important to have here the capacity to have those dialogue and those platforms to exchange ideas about the future, but also how we make it happen in the present.
Thank you. Ambassador, a question for you. As AI, quantum, and bioengineering accelerate and leap ahead, how can human rights frameworks keep up and make sure that we don't have systemic abuse by governments and also corporations?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, thanks for having me here. It's a new feeling to be the warm-up act to the keynote speak of the foreign minister. That shows how innovative diplomacy can be sometimes. Look, human rights, like every other field, is very much under the influence now of what's happening in technology and science. It's one of the destabilizing factors right now. We talk a lot about geopolitics, but technology is at least as important. The question is, do we need to adapt international treaties, instruments we have? Probably not. Probably what we need is a conversation about how we use them, what they mean in these new circumstances, how they need to be implemented facing this new technology. And in order to do that, we need to be able to exchange with people with scientific backgrounds. We need to build this bridge between diplomats and scientists, so the scientists can tell us what these new technologies mean, and of course what is further down on the horizon technology upon us, and for the diplomats then to discuss among ourselves, how do we prepare, what does it mean for instance in the field of human rights.
Thank you. Sami, with job cuts hitting Geneva and other hubs for diplomacy, science and innovation rising, what can this city do to remain relevant?
Yes, a very good question. I'm not in charge anymore, so I'm free of speech. Very good. Part of that, I think, the core values what Geneva represents are totally valid, more than ever. But it's true, the challenge we face, it's not just about money. Money is crucial, obviously, because, as you say, jobs and conferences, and we already saw the figures that the airport of Geneva has a reduction of number of passengers. Even the cleaning industry in Geneva is suffering, as an example, because it's a domino effect. But what makes me nervous is that it's beyond money. It's about values and rules and the whole framework of multilateralism, which is challenged. And to be a little bit provocative, I think multilateralism, if you define it at the core, is the expression that public institutions have a crucial role in handling collective issues and finding solutions together. To paraphrase Churchill, who said something like, I mean, it's pretended it's Churchill, maybe it's not Churchill, democracy is the worst political system with exception of all others. Multilateralism maybe is the worst system except for all other approaches. So, but I feel that there is a defined voluntary offensive against public institutions in general, public authority, public values, and we may face a global privatization of public action, of states, even of local governments, and you know, to deal, because private is more efficient, it's more effective, combined with technology. And that makes me really nervous. Mm-hmm. So to quote the famous Italian Marxist philosopher Gramsci, if you are realistic, you become pessimistic. But by choice, you remain optimistic. So I think we have to work, and there are still very positive forces in society. I think, and that's the GESDA approach, to remind people that we need to anticipate, as you said, because if you start discussing when things happen, it's too late. And to face also the challenge that some people, maybe not the audience here, but some people do not believe in science anymore. You know the pandemia story, you know it very well at WHO. So we have to be very offensive in a positive sense to show that we can bring really solutions and to make them understandable for a wider audience, because that's one of the biggest challenges. You know, AI, neurosciences, eco-augmentations, it's frightening. Mm-hmm. So we have to show how to make it also understandable, and that's a huge challenge. And there are still core values like human rights, for example. It's not like passé. It sounds obvious for us, but not for everybody. So it's a nice challenge, and Geneva should export, without being arrogant, its way of doing things, because many people on the planet, I guess, are expecting something different than the techno-oligarchs or the authoritarian regimes. I hope. I believe.
This is a question for whoever wants to take it, but is the conversation between scientists and diplomats usually successful? Because I have the feeling you don't necessarily speak the same language, and then you have to translate that conversation into something for the wider public. So how do you go about that? How does science diplomacy work in practice? Ambassador?
If I may, from my experience, it's successful where it happens. It's extremely important. You know, we diplomats come together and discuss new phenomena in many different fields, and with all due respect to my own trade, but we're not always the experts. We still discuss and try to find solutions. And it's not really possible, or at least not possible, to find good solutions if you don't have the actual knowledge, what's behind it. If you do treaties on the use of technology in defense, or the pandemic treaty, basically almost all the areas. So in my experience, when you bring in scientists who explain to you what the real issues are, not only does it help you to find a common language and common understanding, which is necessary to then come to conclusions. If you don't do that, your discussions will remain ideological, overly political, so you need the facts. But it also will help you to find solutions that are really able to be practical and to be implemented and to address the issue. Now, ideally, we would do this before things happening. Mostly, we are a bit behind the curve. So that's where anticipatory science comes in. And that's the brilliance for me, for GESDA and for GESDA happening in Geneva. There is an opportunity to build this bridge between those who negotiate in the UN and those who are here who know the science and who can tell us what is ahead. We just probably still have to do better to build these bridges, to bring the two together.
How are we doing in terms of keeping the global south and the next generation part of these conversations?
That's maybe the most difficult issue, because when we are talking about quick development of science, of modern technologies, this is taking place mostly in the global north. Of course, global south participates. Lots of bright scientists from global south, they move to institutions, to universities, to laboratories, which are the cutting edge of the science. And that's, of course, not good for the global south. And that's why, for example, the initiatives like Open Quantum Institute are very, very important, because we really have to involve global south. At the same time, we really have to think about the future of economy. It's absolutely clear that these days we can't have a proper economy unless you have access to internet. And maybe 1/3 of our population still does not have access to internet. You can't receive a good education unless you can be part of the global community of... that's why the project we have here in Geneva by ITU and by other partners to connect every school in the world to the internet is so important. So we really have to talk about it, because really it's became a common place to speak about new digital divide, but it's taking place, and we really have to address it. And even wider, when we use, for example, artificial intelligence. ChatGPT is getting wiser, it's getting more politically correct. But still, if you work hard with it, you see ChatGPT still thinks like a white male. And quite often, after long, long discussion, it gives you something and you're just stricken how outdated it is. But it's still the result of all these algorithms. And of course, that's the result of this huge data of human history, human heritage, which ChatGPT applies on it. We can't tell him, well, just use the data from the last 20 years or 10 years. It uses for the centuries. And it makes ChatGPT and other AI systems biased. That's also an issue. So there are lots of things which we really have to work together, maybe within Global Digital Compact, maybe within, here in Geneva, every year we have Summit AI for Good, and the next year it will be the first time when it will be coupled with a beginning of a global dialogue for AI governance. So there are things which are already taking place. We just have to speed them up here in Geneva.
What's the missing piece on AI governance? Because this is the technology that is really part of everybody's life today. Like, what are we missing?
Well, when I was a girl, like everybody in my generation, I adored science fiction, and Isaac Asimov novels with the laws of robotechnics seemed absolutely natural for me. I was absolutely sure that there is a law that a robot can't kill a human, that a robot can't harm another human being, etc. We are living in the situation when we don't even have these AI ethics. We do have certain non-binding understanding, but we do not know how to really develop AI within the compact of ethics, within the context of human rights. And for me, that's the key issue. We don't have some kind of a framework within which we can develop and should develop AI.
Go ahead.
Yes, I fully agree. War is a terrible thing, but at some stage in the past, human beings decided to write the Geneva Conventions to at least reduce a little bit the horror of war. Later on, the Human Rights Declaration. It should be obvious that we have human rights, but still it's better to have a framework and bodies to ensure it. Jürg has a very easy task this year with chairing the Human Rights Council. So we need something similar. There was already the talk about Geneva Convention on digitalization journal, not only AI. And there are other fields like brain-computer interface, which is coming, quantum, all these issues, even eco-augmentation, when you try to influence the climate. That's a tricky thing. A lot of people do it already. So we need this, but it takes time, it takes energy, it's a slow process, and it's not the time for slow process. Unfortunately, that's one of the challenges we have. And talking about youth, since I'm also chairing the Federal Commission for Youth and Children, which is a consultative body for the Federal Council, we should trust the young people. It's not just an empty phrase. We like to make, youth parliaments, youth groups. Somehow we give them opportunity to express something. But we don't trust them because as adults, we still believe that we know things better than they do. They are much more clever than we can imagine. We made a study on digital practice between a group of 15-25, another group of 45, 55 years old. The conclusion was overwhelming. 15-25, they managed quite well. They knew the traps, they knew all the dangers. The 45-55, catastrophe. We should trust them, involve them really, not just alibi. Because they're afraid, they're nervous. Because I have the impression that the adult world is not managing much at the moment. I don't say if it's true or wrong, but the impression is not very good.
About the missing piece, if I may, I think ultimately it's, of course, the political authorities who have to decide if they want new governance models or need or want. But I think the better we build this bridge between scientists and people in government, and the better understood the science is, the science that exists already and the science that is coming, the better we will have a basis to realize we need governance, what kind of governance. Governance also, now we're talking about threats. It's not just threats, there's also a lot of opportunity in technology. So again, the pitch for this bridge building between scientists and diplomats and other government representatives to help us understand as early as possible what's on the horizon, what the challenges and opportunities are, to then move us on to make propositions to the political authorities to take decisions.
So looking towards that future, which might be utopian or dystopian, depending on whether you lean optimistic or pessimistic, Geneva brings together some of the world's brightest diplomatic and scientific minds. If you could set one global priority for them to tackle together, just one, for a problem of the future that we just don't fully understand yet but see coming, what would it be?
One technical sphere?
Yeah, one technological or scientific breakthrough that you worry about the most, or you see the most opportunity in.
I can't make a hierarchy on issues, but one area I would like to also look more into and have more conversations in scientists is the social science side. You know, we are talking a lot about how we missed the train on the internet, how we probably missed it on AI, how we will be able to address quantum, etc. But at the same time, what we also face today is we are increasingly, I think, not understanding what the people, how societies evolve and how societies are becoming more and more skeptical of institutions and why that is and what kind of response that requires. So to look more into I don't know whether it's a correct term to talk about soft science vis-a-vis hard science, but to look more into that, to have more conversations on that side as a company to the tech science part.
I think for me, what is very important is to have a more equitable science, because it has to be embedded in at the source of innovation and so on. And for this, we need also more equitable research ecosystems. Because if I take the example for the mRNA vaccine, for instance, the first vaccine required a cold chain at -80 degrees, and this is a kind of cold chain that doesn't exist anywhere. But rich countries were able to develop this cold chain at the early days of the pandemic, while many developing countries couldn't afford it. It was too expensive. So I think when we discuss innovation, we need to have this equity lens, and it has to be embedded in research ecosystems as well.
I just had a follow-up question on that. Your organization is going through cuts and key units are being displaced abroad. How does that affect our ability to prepare for the next pandemic or the next health crisis?
Yes, well, so we are facing a difficult period, but the downside, well, first there is the downsizing, but we have done it in as strategic way as possible, so keeping really the functions that are really essential. And the people who are deployed in other hubs of WHO, it has been based also on certain functions that are really technical, that can be done in other places, but all what is about health diplomacy remains in Geneva.
Thank you. I'm going to give a chance to the audience to ask questions as well, because I know there's a lot of knowledge in this room. So if anybody would like to raise their hand.
Who starts?
In the back there.
Good afternoon, and thank you for a wonderful panel. My name is Ambassador Ka from the Gambia. The question I have is, how, from your perspective, do you see International Geneva in 2025 centering data governance in anticipation for the future, where equitable access, sovereignty and innovation influence global decisions, particularly for us from the global south? Thank you.
Volunteers.
Here's a friend. But thanks for the question. It's something I was going to add also to what the DG already said. I think what we have in Geneva is also the community of nations. We have 193 member states in the UN. Almost all of them are in Geneva. So if you want to participate in this discussion and give the opportunity to all the countries to participate in this discussion, a place like Geneva is the best place to do it, to have these conversations, to open it up to everybody. And for us, almost all the countries who are not to the extent in control of this technology, like very few, our best interest to still keep having a voice in this, to have a voice in the conversation, is to maintain this multilateral system. And Geneva is the place to be, and for us diplomats who represent this country, to make sure that the system stays alive. And in that sense, with all the pressures and changes we have right now, I tend to remain optimistic, not just because it's the last choice I can make, but genuinely optimistic. We are here. We see countries engaging, and through this engagement, safeguarding a role in the conversation about how this technology should be dealt with in the future.
Sami.
Maybe I'll add something. I really think that Geneva has absolutely huge convening power. There are so many events taking place here in Geneva who has become a really global events. And it's not only, well, as we say them officially, mandated activities of the United Nations, because all these mandated activities, all these events which are taking place are really surrounded by lots of side events. And these side events are really offered by the member states, by non-governmental organizations. And they bring new voices, voices from the global south, voices from the young people. For example, every week there is, for example, we have GESDA this week, but we also have Geneva Peace Week with many, many, many activities. Next week we will have a UNCTAD ministerial conference which will take place here in Geneva, again surrounded by many side events and side activities. And I think from this perspective, Geneva is really absolutely unique place, because you never have in one place so many different minds. And you asked a question to choose one sphere. I hesitated because I can't choose just one sphere, because all these spheres are all interconnected, because all our challenges like artificial intelligence, climate change and the possibility artificially to change the climate, biology and gene engineering, space, outer space, lunar, and this is all interconnected. And here in Geneva, we really have the representatives from all these spheres. That's why it's something we should use.
Sami.
Yes, obviously multilateralism is based primarily on states, but as this was just said, we need the other actors. And I don't remember the name of the institution, just the annual report on democracy in national states. For the first time, there are more undemocratic states than democratic states. So we have to deal with that. On the other hand, you have interesting revolutions in Nepal or Madagascar, youth, mainly the youth. So we have, my combination would be local region governments, youth, and science. To be very present in the system, we need them. And so states who still are doing very constructive work, like Switzerland, need allies. And to show to people that democracy, human rights, and negotiation, and decent way of working together is still better than, you know, authoritarian or whatever type of regimes.
I think that's a great note to end on. We're coming up to time. I'd really like to thank all of the speakers for your amazing insights and inputs. Audience, thank you very much for being here. Audience online also, thank you for joining us.